September 1944, northeastern France. Dawn comes in low and colourless, pressed flat by fog. A Sherman sits half hidden behind a hedgerow, engine idling like a restrained animal. Inside, the air is hot and metallic. Sweat clings to canvas collars. The crew listens to the world through armour. Distant track rattle, a muffled engine note, the faint click of a turret traverse somewhere beyond sight. Buttoned up, they are safe from fragments. Buttoned up, they are nearly blind. A hand lifts something small near the hatch. Cheap glass, a pocket mirror, angled just right. For a heartbeat, it steals a sliver of the battlefield the tank cannot see. A moving shadow, a line of steel, a threat forming on the flank. To understand why a few dollars worth of improvisation could matter more than inches of armor, we have to step back into the war that trapped men inside these machines. By mid-1944, the war in Western Europe had become an argument fought at close range. After the Allied landings, in Normandy on June 6, 1944, the front did not immediately break into open country. It hardened into hedgerows, sunken lanes, and small fields stitched together by earthbanks and thick roots. For infantry, it was suffocating. For tanks, it was worse. A single lane could funnel armor into a killing line. A single gap in a hedge could become the only doorway onto the next field, and the only place an enemy gunner needed to watch. The American tank that carried much of this burden was the M4 Sherman, reliable, mass-produced, mechanically forgiving compared to many of its contemporaries. But the Sherman's battlefield problem was not only what it could penetrate, it was what its crew could perceive in time. Every day, we tell real stories from World War II. By subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell button, you help preserve these stories for future generations. A tank crew fought in layers. Outside, the battlefield moved fast. Dust, muzzle flashes, a gun barrel appearing for seconds before disappearing behind cover. Inside, vision narrowed into small rectangles of glass and periscopes. When a Sherman buttoned up, closing hatches to protect against shell splinters and small arms fire, every view of the world became filtered through optics that could be obscured by mud, fog, smoke, or a single strike of debris. The commander's job, finding targets, reading terrain, warning the driver, became a continuous struggle against blind angles. In Normandy's cramped terrain, this mattered with cruel clarity. German anti-tank guns and tanks did not need to dominate long distances. They needed to wait for a Sherman to expose a flank while cresting a bank or turning through a gap. In such fights, the first penetrating hit often decided everything that followed. A crew hit without warning rarely got a second chance to correct a mistake. Even a non-penetrating strike could stun men, jam mechanisms, knock sights out of alignment, and turn a disciplined scan into frantic guesswork. So crews learned that survival was not just armor thickness or gun caliber. It was seconds, it was angles, it was the ability to notice what the tank's steel body naturally hid. And as the summer of 1944 gave way to faster, more fluid operations, that need for immediate awareness followed American armored columns into the next phase of the campaign. By late summer, the map began to loosen. After the breakout from Normandy, American armored formations pushed east with speed that felt, for a moment, like inevitability. Columns moving on roads choked with dust, bridging units racing to keep pace, fuel and ammunition becoming as decisive as firepower. But the German army did not vanish. It recoiled, reorganized, and waited for terrain and weather to slow the advance. In northeastern France, the battlefield could change by the hour. Open fields offered longer sightlines than the bocage, but they introduced new dangers: folds in the ground that hid hull-down guns, villages that became hard points, and morning fog that erased distance. In those conditions, tanks often fought without the clean clarity people imagine. Crews fired at shapes, at movement, at the momentary glint of metal through mist. One of the clearest examples came in September 1944 around Aracourt, where American armor, elements of the US 4th Armored Division, met German counterattacks that included Panthers and other armored vehicles. The fighting was influenced not only by tactics and numbers, but by visibility itself. Fog that concealed advances, sudden encounters at short range, and the constant pressure of making decisions with incomplete information. In such battles, even a strong tank could be reduced to a target if it appeared first, if its silhouette emerged before it had confirmed what it was facing. This is where the culture of field adaptation becomes important. Armies issue manuals. The battlefield writes amendments in grease pencil. Crews and mechanics added improvised stowage, welded extra track links where they thought it might help, repositioned gear, adjusted routines for scanning and communication. Some changes were crude, some were quiet. Many were never officially recorded in the clean language of doctrine because they were born from desperation, not design. A small mirror, something inexpensive, personal, and easily replaced, fit naturally into that world. It didn't change the tank's gun. It didn't thicken armor. It changed something more fragile. The crew's awareness of space. It offered a way to watch a sector without exposing a head and shoulders above the hatch. It let a commander check an angle that steel and periscopes made awkward. And in a war where a single unseen flank could end 5 lives in a flash of heat and smoke, that kind of advantage did not feel small at all. Human A-tank crew lived in a shrinking world. When the hatches were closed, the Sherman became a steel room filled with vibration and smell, fuel, oil, hot metal, the faint sting of cordite that never fully left the fabric of the vehicle. Every sound arrived distorted, a dull thud instead of a crack, a grinding shiver through the hull instead of a clear direction. Men learned each other's breathing without thinking about it. They learned the rhythm of the engine, the way sailors learn waves. And they learned fear in a very specific form, not fear of a visible enemy. That could be fought. Fear of a hit that came from nowhere. A crew could be doing everything right, moving with infantry, scanning, maintaining spacing, and still be struck by a gun they never saw. Inside, time slowed into tiny mechanical tasks. Traverse, range, load, fire, correct. Outside, time was violence. A shell that penetrated could turn the interior into splinters and flame. Even if it didn't, the impact could knock men against steel, scramble the turret crew, and crush the fragile sense of control. The worst moments were the ones before contact, when the commander knew something was out there and could not prove it. A small mirror did not remove fear. It redirected it. It gave the commander a way to check a flank without lifting his body into open air. It let him confirm movement instead of imagining it. In a world of partial vision, that mattered psychologically as much as tactically, because certainty, even for a second, could keep a crew from freezing or overreacting. Tactical tactics in armored warfare were built on sectors and timing. Every tank had blind spots created by its own design and by terrain. Hedgerows, folds in the ground, ruined walls. These turned fights into angles. The most dangerous angle was the one nobody owned, the slice of space no one was watching, because everyone assumed someone else was. A Sherman commander had to scan constantly while staying alive. If he stood fully exposed, he improved his vision, but invited rifle fire, shrapnel, and sniper shots. If he stayed buttoned up, he survived the fragments, but risked being surprised. This trade-off was not theoretical, it was daily. That is why improvised tools mattered. A mirror could be used to peek along the side of the turret, check behind the tank during a reverse movement, or watch a corner while the main gun stayed trained forward. It could support the crew's scanning discipline, quick confirmation, then back to the primary sector. It was not a magical solution. It was a method of buying a few seconds of warning and in armored combat, warning often determined who fired first. And once a crew could see first, everything else, radio calls, turret direction, gun laying, could fall into place with lethal speed. Technological. The Sherman was not blind by accident. It was blind by necessity. A tank is a compromise between protection and perception. To survive artillery fragments and small arms fire, the crew must be enclosed. To fight effectively, the crew must see. The Sherman's designers provided vision through periscopes, sighting systems, and viewing ports. Optics intended to let men observe without exposing themselves. But every optical solution had limits. Periscopes offered a narrow field of view. Glass could be smeared by rain, dust, or mud thrown up by tracks. Smoke, battle smoke, or simple engine exhaust could turn a clear lane into a blank wall. And under stress, a restricted view became a trap. The world outside moved faster than the commander could zizz, stitched together through small rectangles of vision. This is where the mirror fits historically as a plausible field expedient. A mirror is not advanced technology. It is basic optics, a way to redirect a line of sight. Used near a hatch or vision opening, it can let a commander check a direction without shifting his entire position. It can help cover a blind angle during a slow pivot. It can let a crew member confirm what the periscope only suggests. And, importantly, it aligns with how soldiers actually behaved. Crews were constantly trying to improve what they could see by cleaning optics obsessively, by choosing hull-down positions, by adjusting how they moved through terrain to minimize exposure. A mirror simply offered another tool for the same problem, making a sealed steel vehicle behave, briefly, like it had wider eyes. It didn't make the Sherman better than a Panther on paper. It made a Sherman crew less likely to be surprised in the moment that mattered. Leadership, moral field improvisation, always lived in a moral grey zone. Commanders wanted discipline. Standardization kept vehicles maintainable, crews trainable, and units predictable. But commanders also wanted results. They wanted crews alive. They wanted tanks still running tomorrow. And the front line forced a kind of practical tolerance. If an unofficial modification increased awareness without endangering the vehicle, many leaders looked the other way. For the men inside the tank, the moral question was simpler. Survive without becoming reckless. A mirror might keep a commander buttoned up longer, reducing his risk from sniper fire and shrapnel. But it could also tempt a crew into believing they had solved visibility, into pushing forward with false confidence. Good leadership meant understanding the tool's limits, drilling scanning discipline, and reminding crews that every aid was partial. There was also the quiet ethical weight of what improved vision enabled. Better awareness meant quicker kills. It meant catching an enemy tank as it maneuvered, spotting infantry before they reached a close ambush position, or detecting an anti-tank gun just as it revealed itself. In war, survival and lethality are tightly bound. A cheap improvement in observation could translate directly into bodies not burning inside steel, on one side or the other. That is the sober truth behind the title. The mirror is not important because it is clever. It is important because it represents how small advantages, accepted by leaders, practiced by crews, could shape who lived through the next contact. And now, with the stakes set, the story tightens toward the moment when a tiny angle of glass becomes the difference between being hunted and becoming the hunter. September 1944. The fog does not lift cleanly. It thins in patches, then returns, drifting across the fields like smoke that never chose a side. A Sherman column moves with caution, not speed. Engines stay low. Radios murmur in clipped bursts. The tanks are spaced out, close enough to support each other, far enough that one hit won't turn into a chain of fire. Ahead, the ground rolls gently, but every rise hides what waits behind it. A village sits somewhere beyond the haze, roofs barely visible. the edges of buildings breaking the horizon like teeth. Inside one Sherman, the crew works by habit. The driver keeps the hull steady, easing around soft ground that could trap a track. The gunner holds the main gun forward, ready to snap onto a target that might appear for seconds and then vanish. The loader braces, hand near a shell that cannot be loaded until the commander calls for it. The commander stays low, hatch cracked only enough to breathe cooler air, eyes straining through restricted angles. Buttoned up is safety. Buttoned up is ignorance. The first warning is not a shot. It is the sense of wrongness that comes when the battlefield goes quiet in an unnatural way. When distant movement seems to stop. When the fog feels too helpful. When the world offers no information because someone is trying to deny it. The commander shifts position. Periscope view. Nothing clear. Another periscope. Still nothing. Only blurred hedges and a line of trees that could hide an entire company. He knows what German armor can do when it appears first. He knows the price of waiting. Then he brings up the mirror. It is small enough to fit in one hand. Plain. Cheap. It catches grey light and throws it back toward his eye at a hard angle. He doesn't stare into it like vanity. He uses it like a tool, tilting it so it looks down the flank, along the side of the turret, into a strip of space the periscope cannot comfortably own. At first, it is only fog. Then it is shape. A darker rectangle moves against the pale field. Slow, deliberate, almost confident. A gun barrel, long and steady, not the short profile of a half-track or a truck. The movement is lateral, trying to slide into position for a flank shot before anyone notices. The commander does not shout. He does not waste words. The call is immediate, controlled. Direction, distance estimate, urgency. The gunner begins to traverse. The driver brakes. The loader's body tightens, as if the steel walls have narrowed. The mirror has done its job. It has turned an unseen approach into a known threat. And in armored combat, the moment you know is the moment you can act. The turret swings with practiced speed, not panic. Steel teeth bite into the traverse ring as the gunner brings the barrel onto the commander's call. The fog blurs everything except motion. The enemy tank, now undeniable, has paused just long enough to line up its own shot. That pause is the opening. It is the fraction of time where two crews are no longer equal. On! The word lands heavy inside the turret. The gunner fine adjusts, trusting instinct as much as optics. The loader rams the round home, steps back into the narrow space that belongs to him alone. The driver locks the brakes, hull steady enough for accuracy. No one speaks now. There is only sequence. The Sherman fires. The recoil slams through the hull. A sharp violence that rattles teeth and blurs vision. Smoke floods the interior for a heartbeat before the extractor does its work. Outside, the round strikes armor. Not perfectly, but hard enough. The enemy tank shudders, its movement no longer smooth. Whether the hit penetrates or disables, the effect is immediate. Initiative is gone. Second shot follows faster than the first. The German crew reacts, but reacting is not the same as choosing. They had been maneuvering for surprise. Now they are responding to contact. Their gun swings too late. The angle is wrong. The advantage they were building dissolves under pressure they did not expect. Around the Sherman, the battlefield ignites. Other tanks, alerted by radio and muzzle flash, bring their guns to bear. The fog that hid movement now amplifies sound, each shot echoing, each impact carrying through the ground. Infantry nearby flatten themselves into earth that offers no guarantees. When the enemy vehicle finally stops moving, it does so without ceremony. Smoke leaks from seams. A hatch opens, then closes again. There is no cheering inside the Sherman, no celebration, only breathing, returning to something like normal. Hands shaking just enough to notice. The crew knows what's almost happened. If the flank had gone unseen for seconds longer, The first shot might have come from the other direction. The interior of the tank might have filled with flame and fragments instead of smoke and relief. The difference was not bravery. It was not superior armor. It was awareness, gained early enough to matter. The commander lowers the mirror and stows it without comment. There is no time to dwell on tools. The fog is still there. The village still waits. The war has not paused to acknowledge what nearly occurred. But something has shifted. From this moment forward, the crew moves differently. Scans are tighter, angles are checked with intention. The knowledge remains that survival can hinge on the smallest advantage, on a glimpse caught indirectly, on a threat revealed before it chooses its moment. And when the column moves again, it carries that lesson forward, etched not into doctrine, but into muscle memory. When the firing stops, the battlefield does not become quiet. It becomes empty in a particular way. Burned vehicles sit where momentum ended. Tracks are frozen mid-turn. Shell casings lie in damp grass, already losing their warmth. Smoke hangs low, refusing to rise, as if the ground itself is holding on to what just happened. For tank crews, the aftermath is a checklist performed under adrenaline. Systems checked, ammunition counted, wounded identified if there are any. Only later does the shaking start. American armored units in late 1944 paid for every mile they gained. Battles like those around Aracourt did not produce clean victory photographs. They produced lists. Tanks knocked out, crews killed or wounded, vehicles recovered or abandoned. German forces suffered heavily as well, losing armor they could not easily replace. But that symmetry did not lessen the cost for the men who survived contact and now had to move again. Inside a Sherman that has just fought, the smell lingers. Even without penetration, the concussion leaves bruises and headaches. Men replay seconds in their minds, knowing exactly where the margin lived. A shot that hit but did not penetrate. A delay that could have been fatal. A movement spotted just in time. It is in these moments, between engagements, that the importance of awareness becomes undeniable. Crews talk quietly about what they saw and what they missed. They adjust habits. They remember which angles felt dangerous, which approaches felt wrong. The mirror, if used, is not discussed as a clever trick. It is treated the way soldiers treat anything that helped them live, with practical respect and no sentimentality. Losses nearby sharpen this understanding. A tank destroyed by a flank hit is not an abstraction. It is a warning written in twisted steel. Crews do not need lectures to absorb the lesson. They have seen what happens when surprise works in the enemy's favor. So the immediate aftermath is not celebration or reflection. It is continuation, movement, repair, reorganization, carried out with a deeper awareness of how thin the line truly is. The lessons did not remain on that field. As American armored units pushed deeper into France and toward Germany, experience accumulated faster than manuals could be rewritten. Crews rotated, replacements arrived with fresh uniforms and untested instincts. Veterans passed down habits instead of theories. Where to look first, when to trust a hunch, when to stop moving and simply observe. Visibility became a discipline, not a convenience. The US Army did not issue mirrors as standard equipment for tanks, and there is no evidence of a formal program built around such devices. But that absence is itself instructive. War rarely advances through single inventions adopted overnight. It advances through countless small adjustments, procedural, behavioral, sometimes physical, that never earn an official designation. What mattered was not the object, but the mindset it represented, an understanding that perception was a weapon system of its own. Post-war analysis of armored combat repeatedly emphasized situational awareness, coordination between tanks and infantry, and the importance of seeing the enemy before being seen. These conclusions were drawn from statistics, reports, and survivor testimony, but they were lived first, inside steel boxes, by men who learned under fire. Every crew that survived a near ambush carried that knowledge forward, shaping how units moved, how commanders positioned vehicles, how aggressively or cautiously ground was taken. There was also a quieter psychological consequence. Survivors understood that survival was rarely heroic in the way stories prefer. It was often mundane. It depended on routine, caution, and attention to detail. A mirror, a pause before advancing, a second glance at a suspicious tree line. These things did not feel dramatic. They felt necessary, and over time, that realism hardened into doctrine. Not because a mirror changed the war, but because the war taught soldiers that even the smallest improvement in awareness could ripple outward into fewer surprises, fewer burning tanks, and fewer names added to casualty lists. That understanding outlived the Sherman itself. War rarely turns on grand revelations. More often, it shifts on the quiet acceptance of reality, that survival belongs to those who notice first, adapt fastest, and respect how little margin the battlefield allows. In 1944, the Sherman did not become deadlier because of a miracle weapon or a secret design. It became more survivable because its crews learned to treat awareness as armor. The mirror, whether used once or often, stands as a symbol of that lesson. Not a mythic device, not a guaranteed solution, simply a reminder that steel walls protect only what they allow a man to understand. Inside a tank, vision was not passive. It had to be fought for. This truth reshaped armored warfare long after the smoke cleared. Designers pursued better optics. Commanders emphasized crew coordination and scanning discipline. Training acknowledged that seeing the enemy first could outweigh theoretical advantages in armor or firepower. But the human lesson endures most clearly. Every improvement carried moral weight. Better awareness saved lives, often by ending other lives more efficiently. There was no clean separation between protection and lethality. The men inside the Sherman understood that balance instinctively, without philosophy or slogans. In the end, the battlefield nightmare was not created by a cheap modification. It was created by what that modification revealed. That in modern war, even the smallest edge, earned honestly and used soberly, could decide who climbed out of the hatch and who never would.